The dawn of January 13th, 2026, finds the Islamic Republic of Iran gripped by a level of domestic instability that has surpassed any historical precedent since the 1979 revolution, as the intersection of economic collapse and political fury has pushed the nation to a breaking point. International monitoring agencies and financial analysts report that the primary catalyst for this current wave of unrest was the catastrophic devaluation of the Iranian rial, which hit an all-time low of 1.4 million against the United States dollar earlier this week, effectively vaporizing the savings of the middle class and sending the price of basic staples like bread and medicine into an unmanageable upward spiral. What began as localized strikes by bazaar merchants and labor unions in late December has now transformed into a full-scale nationwide uprising that spans every province, from the Kurdish regions in the northwest to the Baluchistan province in the southeast, with citizens demanding a total dismantling of the theocratic structure. Human rights organizations, including the Human Rights Activist News Agency, have confirmed today that the death toll has officially surpassed the grim milestone of 2,000 individuals, with the vast majority of casualties being young protesters met with lethal force by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij paramilitary units. The tactical nature of the state's response has shifted significantly in the last 24 hours. Whereas previous weeks saw the use of rubber bullets and tear gas, current field reports and verified video evidence show the widespread deployment of live ammunition and heavy machine guns mounted on technical vehicles in urban centers like Tehran, Isfahan, and Mashhad. This systemic violence has resulted in at least 16,700 documented detentions, with international observers expressing grave concern over the conditions within Evin prison and other detention facilities, where reports of summary executions and torture have begun to leak through the digital blackout. Despite the regime's attempts to characterize the movement as a localized riot, the sheer scale of the strikes and the visibility of the civilian defiance indicate a fundamental shift in the Iranian social contract. The economic desperation that once fueled quiet resentment has now evolved into a vocal, militant demand for systemic change, as the Iranian public appears to have lost its fear of the security apparatus in the face of total financial ruin and a perceived lack of future prospects under the current leadership. In an era where information is as critical as physical territory, the Iranian government has implemented a near-total communication blackout to mask the severity of the crackdown from the eyes of the international community. Yet this digital iron curtain is being systematically breached by new technologies. As of the morning of January 13th, 2026, the global internet monitoring service NetBlocks confirmed that connectivity in Iran remains at just 7% of its normal capacity, with mobile data networks almost entirely severed and landline connections restricted to a state-controlled intranet. However, the regime's efforts to isolate the population have been complicated by the widespread and clandestine use of Starlink satellite terminals, which have been smuggled across the borders of Iraq and Turkey in increasing numbers over the past several months. Reports from international tech correspondents indicate that these satellite links are now the primary means by which activists are uploading high-definition footage of security forces firing on unarmed crowds, providing the world with an unfiltered view of the carnage that the state media continues to deny. In response, the Iranian Ministry of Information and Communications Technology has reportedly deployed specialized electronic warfare units to hunt down these satellite signals using signal triangulation equipment, leading to a series of high-stakes raids on private residences suspected of hosting illegal hardware. Simultaneously, the state has been forced to briefly restore limited international calling capabilities to allow for essential banking and diplomatic functions, a window that many Iranians have used to contact relatives abroad and relay accounts of the violence. This information war extends into the realm of state-sponsored propaganda, where the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting has been running continuous segments labeling protesters as terrorists and foreign agents, while accusing the West of orchestrating a soft revolution through digital subversion. The tension between the regime's desire for total informational opacity and the protesters' use of decentralized communication tools has created a chaotic landscape where truth is a contested commodity. International journalists, largely barred from entering the country, are forced to rely on these verified digital snippets to piece together the reality on the ground, revealing a nation where the government is increasingly at war with the technological realities of the 21st century, even as it tries to drag its citizens back into a state of total isolation and silence. The geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically today as United States President Donald Trump intensified his administration's rhetoric, moving from expressions of moral support to explicit promises of intervention and economic warfare that have sent shockwaves through global markets. Taking to Truth Social and later addressing reporters from the South Lawn of the White House, Trump issued a direct and unprecedented directive to the Iranian people, telling them to take over your institutions and declaring in all capital letters that help is on its way. This shift in language marks a definitive departure from the more cautious diplomatic approaches of previous years and signals that the United States is actively seeking a change in the governing structure of Tehran. To back these words with tangible action, the president announced the immediate cancellation of all diplomatic channels and potential meetings with Iranian officials, stating that no dialogue will occur until the senseless killing of the Iranian populace is halted entirely. More significantly for the global economy, Trump announced a sweeping new executive order imposing a 25% tariff on any nation that continues to engage in trade with the Islamic Republic, a move specifically designed to isolate Tehran from its remaining economic partners such as China, India, and Turkey. This secondary sanction strategy is intended to create a total global embargo, forcing the world's largest economies to choose between the Iranian market and the American consumer base. Inside the West Wing, sources report that the National Security Council is currently reviewing a menu of military options that range from targeted strikes on IRGC command centers to the deployment of naval assets to the Persian Gulf to ensure the protection of regional interests. Trump's warnings have been characteristically blunt, stating that any Iranian retaliation against American assets or allies would result in the U.S. hitting Iran at levels they have never been hit before, effectively putting the two nations on a direct collision course for military conflict. This aggressive posture has polarized the international community, with some analysts arguing that such rhetoric emboldens the protesters, while others fear it provides the Iranian regime with the perfect pretext to escalate their violence under the guise of national defense against a foreign invader. The administration's current trajectory suggests that the United States is no longer content with containment and is now actively pursuing a strategy of maximum pressure intended to force a total collapse of the current Iranian government. The response from the highest levels of the Iranian leadership has been one of defiant aggression, as Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issued a televised address today that further solidified the regime's uncompromising stance against both domestic dissent and foreign pressure. Khamenei, speaking from an undisclosed location, directly addressed President Trump's comments, accusing the American leader of having hands that are stained with the blood of Iranians and characterizing the ongoing protests as a manifestation of American Zionist terrorism rather than a grassroots movement. This rhetoric is being used to justify an even more brutal internal crackdown, as the state legal apparatus has begun labeling capture protesters as mohareb, or enemies of God, a charge that carries the death penalty under Iranian law. The Iranian military has also signaled its readiness for external conflict, with the IRGC announcing defensive maneuvers along the coast of the Strait of Hormuz, a move that threatens the stability of global oil shipments and has already caused a spike in Brent crude prices. This internal crisis is rapidly spilling over into a regional dilemma, as neighboring countries view the potential collapse of the Iranian state with a mixture of hope and profound dread. Turkish officials have publicly expressed deep concern over the prospect of a massive refugee crisis and the potential for the instability to ignite similar movements within their own borders, particularly among their Kurdish populations. In Iraq, where Iranian influence has been a dominant force for 2 decades, the sudden distraction and potential weakening of the Tehran government have created a power vacuum that various factions are already scurrying to fill, leading to increased tensions in Baghdad. The broader Middle East is now watching with bated breath as the central pillar of the axis of resistance begins to fracture under the weight of its own internal contradictions and external threats. The Iranian government strategy appears to be one of survival at any cost, including the risk of a regional war that could draw in Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. By framing the struggle as a holy war against Western imperialists, the regime hopes to consolidate its hardline base, even as the streets of Tehran and other major cities continue to run with the blood of a younger generation that has clearly signaled its rejection of the theocratic experiment. As the sun sets on January 13th, 2026, the international community finds itself deeply divided over how to respond to the unfolding tragedy in Iran, with a clear rift emerging between the aggressive stance of the United States and the more cautious, humanitarian-focused approach of the European Union and other global powers. While the White House pushes for regime change and economic isolation, European leaders in Berlin, Paris, and Brussels have issued statements condemning the violence, but simultaneously warning against any externally forced political transitions that could lead to a catastrophic civil war or a permanent regional power vacuum. These nations have focused their efforts on calling for an independent United Nations investigation into the death toll and the treatment of detainees. Though such calls are largely viewed as symbolic given the Iranian government's refusal to grant access to international observers. Human rights organizations are now sounding the alarm over a burgeoning humanitarian crisis that extends beyond the immediate violence. The combination of the internet blackout and the economic embargo has led to severe shortages of critical medical supplies, including insulin and chemotherapy drugs, as the supply chains for even sanctioned-exempt goods have collapsed under the weight of new tariff threats. Within the United Nations, a stalemate persists in the Security Council, with China and Russia signaling that they would veto any formal resolution that authorizes military intervention or further punitive measures, citing the principle of national sovereignty. This diplomatic deadlock leaves the Iranian people in a precarious position, caught between a regime that is willing to kill its own citizens to maintain power and an international community that is unable to agree on a unified path forward. The scenes being shared through Starlink and other clandestine means tell a story of immense bravery and unimaginable loss, as students, teachers, and laborers continue to face down armored vehicles with nothing but slogans and stones. The world is watching a historical pivot point in real time, yet the ultimate outcome remains shrouded in uncertainty as the death toll continues to rise and the rhetoric from both Washington and Tehran reaches a fever pitch. Whether this moment leads to a new era of Iranian democracy or a prolonged period of violent suppression and regional war is the question that defines the global stage today, as the people of Iran endure one of the darkest and most decisive chapters in their long and storied history.